Hey, what's up? Islam, Moors in America. What's up? How's it going? Peace to everybody. All right. We'll let some people come in. We're gonna get it popping today. We're gonna get it started. We'll talk about some important stuff. We're gonna hit on some stuff that a lot of people asking about as far as the whole indigenous aspect of who we are. As Moorish Americans. Um, if you've been following the channel for a while, you may have seen the video where we talked about this. We read an excerpt from this book by Jack D. Forbes, right? And the video is called From Indian to Negro. And we were basically going on about how or why people like Waka Flocka Flame, are going on the radio saying that he's indigenous. Because that had just happened and a lot of people were talking about it. So we tied that in and used actual real life accounts from history. Okay. Things that are cited to have sources so that we're not making this up, to show how we're tied into that. Hey, if you could, baby, can you grab the book, Ancient and Modern Britons?
Is it downstairs?
Dave McRitchie. Yeah, Dave McRitchie. Yeah. Yeah, it's downstairs. Thank you. All right. So yeah, we're going to run it back, but also bring in more information. And then a lot of people are new to this, so you probably haven't even seen that video yet. So you're definitely going to want to tune in. If you're watching this on Facebook right now, tag your family and friends in it, just in the comments, because they need to see it too. And if you're watching on YouTube, do the same thing. So everybody share this, share it on your page, share it. And let your family and friends see it. It's not a secret. I mean, there's people who try to keep who we are a secret, okay? And they didn't have our best interests at heart. But, we don't have anything to hide. We're not up to something, heinous. We're not hiding. We're putting it out there for everyone to know. And we're doing it scholarly and, excuse
Islam.
me. So, you know what I'm saying? We're putting it out there. It's definitely not a secret. And like I said, share it with everyone you know. Tag your family and friends. Share this video if you haven't already. Share it on social media, okay? And all right, so we about to get it started. First and foremost, much praise due to the Most High. We're gonna give much praise and to Allah, the Father of the universe. Want to give praise to His holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali.
Honors.
Want to give honors and praise. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thanks to all of you. We also want to give honors to the forerunner of the prophet, Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And hopefully I'm not leaving anyone out. We want to give praise and thanks to all the faithful Moors all around the world. Hotep and Salam Alaikum, Salam, Islam, Shalom, Paz y Amor para todo mundo. Okay? And much love to our family in Brazil. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna get it started. All right. Okay, so first and foremost, what I'm doing here, last year around this time, we read an excerpt. It was just a portion of this book, right? And the title was Use of Negro and Black, referring to persons of Native American ancestry, right? And that's just a portion of this book. This book is called Afro-Americans in the Far West, and this was actually a handbook for educators, right? And it's real hard to find. I mean, like, this book is pretty old. It's out of print. So I just happened to be able to get my hands on it, and I grabbed it. And it was written by a Native American scholar named Jack D. Forbes, which I'm going to do a screen share. For everybody on YouTube, Facebook, you're not going to be able to see this, but y'all just bear with me because I'm going to read it out to you, okay? But, yeah, we're going to get this screen share up. Like I said, just Facebook, just bear with me. I'll read to you what it's saying, okay? So, All right, everybody. Okay, what we have going on here, this book, which you can also go to moorsinamerica.com and you can read the article about this. The link is in the description. Okay. And the whole entire article is on there, not the whole handbook, but the article is. So anyway, this book was written by Jack D. Forbes, as I said earlier, right? And well, if you're looking on YouTube, you'll see a picture of him, long, straight black hair. What you commonly see, you know, in the media when they show Native Americans, if they're not just showing like a straight up person of European descent, they'll show brothers that look like this, right? And I'm not knocking this brother at all. Much respect to him. Jack D. Forbes was a professor of Native American. I'm hitting on this for a reason, so bear with me. This is all gonna make sense. Jack D. Forbes was a professor of Native American Studies and Anthropology at UC Davis from 1969 to 94, right? And so I'm not just reading this for no reason. That's almost 30 years, okay, that he was a professor at UC Davis. He's a Native American of Powhatan and Delaware background who's authored many books and articles and published poet. He organized the Native American movement in 1961, co-founded the California Indian Education Association. Okay, so he's very accomplished. And now I didn't just read this just to go on and on about him, but he was of Powhatan and Lenape descent from New Jersey, right? New Jerusalem. So, which is Algonquin people, okay, Lenape people. All right. So he's originally from the East Coast. And here's some of the books that he wrote. I'll just read this out loud to everybody. One of these books I used to own. We actually gave this away. We gave away a ton of books years ago when we moved to Brazil in South America. Just gave away a lot of books. I had a book called Africans and Native Americans. Many of you have probably seen this book cover before, right? So the entire title, Africans and Native Americans, the Language of Race and the Evolution of Red Black Peoples. And this was by Jack D. Forbes, the professor who, like I said, taught at UC Davis for like nearly 30 years. He's a Native American expert, no matter how you want to cut it. On that cover of the book, he has three brothers, three undeniable brothers with short haircuts, very dark-skinned brothers. And they have like these coif things around their neck, and they're noblemen. And then if I remember correctly, within the book cover, I think it said they were Incan noblemen, right? And then it's got the names like Don Pizarro or something, Don Fran de Robe or something like that. But anyway, these three brothers were noblemen and they were indigenous, okay? And so that's just one book that he wrote. But he, like I said, he did several books. Columbus and Other Cannibals by Jack D. Forbes. That African and Native Americans book I just read out, The American Discovery of Europe, Native Americans of California and Nevada, Indigenous. These are four that he just wrote outright. And then he's contributed to a bunch of other books. Okay. So I'm sharing this to say, like, you know, like he was legit scholar on indigenous American history. And then you can Google him on Facebook, Jack D. Forbes, and see what he looked like. Okay, so I'm saying this to say when I read what I'm about to read is written by him, this is not from some Afrocentric perspective. This isn't, remember that, you know, and if you come in on a video late, rewind it back. Remember, the author that we're reading on and commenting on, providing commentary so that I can provide the proper context for what you're hearing. He was not Afrocentric. He's not trying to just big up our people for no reason, you know. He's telling the truth. He's telling the truth that we're connected, you know, and you got to respect that. And then he did several books and he wrote the handbooks, okay, for teachers, okay. And I mean, they didn't teach this stuff in school where I was at, but we'll get into that, okay. So yeah, I'm going to get started on this. All right, we're back on the regular screen. So, all right, we're reading from the article in Afro-Americans in the Far West, okay? A handbook for educators, and that's by Jack D. Forbes. Everything in here is cited, okay? Not made up, coming from ancient documents, government records, all types of stuff. So we're going to dig into it. And of course, as usual, if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Go ahead and comment. Just bear with me real quick. I'm going to share this link. And just also say hi to just want to say hi to everyone in the chat. Once again, make sure you share this with your family and just hang around. We're going to dig in. This is going to take a couple minutes, but it's going to be well worth it. And this is going to be a classic. You definitely want to refer back to this. And like I said, share this with your family and friends. If there's any skeptics out there, they're not going to be able to remain skeptical any longer. They just sound goofy if they, trying to do that. All right. So just hang on a second. You got anything to say, baby?
Nope. Just peace and blessings, everybody.
All right.
We had a busy day today, so I'm just chilling, taking it all in.
Yeah. So like I said, just make sure you share this with your family and friends and stay tuned. All right. We're gonna dig into this. Even if you've seen the other video, you definitely want to watch this and share. All right. Okay. Just hang on a second, y'all. Get things going.
And if you didn't catch the live from last night, go back and pull that up. It was a great build with the Hood Mystic, one of our own here in Columbus, Ohio. He's out here doing the work on astrology. Big ups to that brother and his family.
Yeah, definitely. The Hood Mystic on YouTube. Okay, so like I said, the book Afro-Americans in the Far West. This was actually a handbook created by Jack D. Forbes for educators. And the article I'm reading is the use of the terms Negro and Black to include persons of Native American ancestry in Anglo North America by Jack D. Forbes. Now, in 1854, the California State Supreme Court sought to bar all non-Caucasians from equal citizenship and civil rights. The court stated the word Black may include all Negroes, but the term Negro does not include all Black persons. All right, this was in the California State Supreme Court in 1854.
You could dig into that right there on its own.
We are of the opinion that the words white, Negro, mulatto, and Black person, whenever they occur in our Constitution, must be taken in their generic sense. That the words Black person in the 14th section must be taken as contra, distinguished from right, and necessarily includes all races other than the Caucasian. As convoluted as that quote may be, it tends to express a strong tendency in the history of the United States towards creating two broad classes of people, white and non-white, citizen and non-citizen, or a semi-citizen, okay? The tendency to create a two-caste society often clashes with the reality of a territory which included many different types of people of all colors and different degrees of intermixture of European, American, African, and Asian. Native American people, whether of unmixed ancestry or mixed with other stocks, were at times affected by the tendency to create a purely white-Black social system, a caste system, especially when living away from a reservation or the ancestral homeland. In the British slave colonies of North America along the Atlantic coast, many persons of American ancestry were at times classified as Blacks, Negroes, mulattoes, or people of color. And someone also commented just saying Asiatic. We know, yeah, that's what we refer to ourselves as. But remember, I'm reading this book, and this got a lot of information in it. So if you're going to get turned off by the words that are being used, it'll prevent you from gaining wisdom from this. So the manner in which Americans and part Americans excuse me, were sometimes classified as mulattoes and people of color from New England to South Carolina and in the Spanish Empire are explored elsewhere. The purpose here is to illustrate how the term Negro has also been applied to people of American descent. So what all that is building up to is showing you how they just, with a broad stroke, just people of color, people of color, people who were indigenous Americans were just being called Negro and labeled as Negro.
Asiatics.
And so it was so broad that it wiped out whatever type of ancestry you had, whether you actually had ancestors who came over in the transatlantic slave trade, or who were maybe captured in the islands and sent up to Louisiana or something like that, or vice versa. It wouldn't have mattered what your ancestry was. They would have been called Negro, even though they were indigenous. They were, Taino or something like that. So this is just painting that picture. And then we're going to list all the stuff that's cited, letting you know how it actually happened to people. And it's, been recorded throughout history on several occasions. Okay. So, all right. Explorations in Ethnic Studies. This was like a publication from 1984, volume 7, number 2. The possibility that Native Americans were commonly called Negroes is very much supported by Portuguese usage. During the colonial period, Brazilian Indians were repeatedly referred to as Negros or Negros de Terra. The Terra. You see the T-E-R-R-A, but we know it's Terra because we used to live in Brazil. We speak Portuguese. And that's true. We've even seen that in like books. My son had like a history book or Brazilian history book, and he's bringing it home, and they're calling the Indios, the Indians, Negros da Terra. Okay, they were calling in Brazil in the school books. Like, can you imagine that if you're here in North America and in the school books they're calling the Native Americans Negros da Terra, Negroes of the land. Okay, so they were calling them Negros de Terra. I've seen that with my own eyes, so we can attest to that. Not making this up. And also some of the native tribes that came to their school, it's like two dark-skinned straight up brothers, straight up, just like anyone else from the hood, but they were Indians and they had their tribal history and everything, and they're coming to the class to teach them about the Negros of Teja. So we've seen this with our own eyes.
And just like Carlinhos Brown, he's an entertainer, and he goes out there on stage, with his, Native American headdress on, and he just looks like, any other African American, but he's Brazilian, and he knows he's connected to the native Brazilians of the land.
Exactly. So
and he wears turbans and all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
we'll do a screen share on that real quick just to show y'all. Like I said, once again on Facebook, you could just look that up. Carlinhos Brown. It's spelled Carlinhos Brown. He's a very famous, world famous actually, singer in Brazil. And he always comes out, especially Carnival. He's like, he initiates everything. So he comes out with the Native American headdress, which is his culture, and he knows that.
That's right.
And he comes out with that, and he also, you'll see him wearing turbans too, because he has dreadlocks. And I mean, like, it's just known, it's just known. Even though they get the same history that we get, that all of us were brought over from Africa, it's just known, they're some are indigenous. Matter of fact, we met a lady, a school teacher from this island in Brazil called Boipeba, who was a school teacher. I already said that, but she had long dreadlocks, dark skin, and she told us that she was indigenous, indigenous American. And we're like, telling her, yeah, we are too. She's Taino, my grandfather's Blackfoot, and she's like, wow, she never, really hears people that look like us saying that, and she was undeniably a sister, right? And so, and then like I said, though, with the screen share, we're showing Carlinhos Brown. He, wears the turbans, which the indigenous population wore all over throughout the country in different regions, wearing turbans and even wearing variations of the fez. Even though you'll hear some people try to knock that or come against it, you can't deny it. Okay. And so that was just one example. And the reason we're really hitting on that is because we've seen this with our own eyes in this book. Okay. They're saying the Indians were referred to as Negros de Terra, Well, we've seen that with our own eyes. Okay, seen that in the school, seen the Indians come to the class that
In the
were
street.
Negros, the Teja, the description that they're giving you, and we've seen that with the population, within the population. Okay, so back to this in Brazil. During the colonial period, Brazilian Indians were repeatedly referred to as Negros de Terra or Negroes. A great many examples from the 16th and later centuries are cited by George Frederici in his analysis of Portuguese sources. These do not have to be repeated here, but suffice to say that it was so common that finally in 1755 a royal decree had to be issued as follows. Among the regrettable practices which have resulted in the disparagement of the Indians, one prime abuse is the unjustifiable and scandalous practice of calling them Negroes. Perhaps by doing so, the intent was no other than to induce in them the belief that by their origins they had been destined to be the slave of whites, and is generally conceded to be the case of blacks from the coast of Africa. The directors will not permit henceforth that anybody may refer to an Indian as a Negro, nor that they themselves may use this epithet amongst themselves, as is currently the case. I should read that again, but this is saying that, and this is obviously, this must have been translated from Portuguese, but it's saying that it was so bad with them just calling the Indians Negroes that there was a royal decree that had to be issued to say, look, man, okay, this is a regrettable practice, and it's obvious that they're trying to classify them as this to put them in a permanent slave class,
and it
which
was
is what we're in.
unacceptable. It was derogatory. It was demeaning.
Okay, and there must have been pushback, from it for them to do this. So they're saying like, yeah, it's unjustified, and this is coming from the royal, the royalty of Portugal. Okay, saying, hey, it's an unjustifiable, scandalous practice of calling them Negroes. It's an abuse. Perhaps by doing so, the intent was no other than to induce in them the belief that by their origins they had been destined to be the slaves of whites. What is this coming from? The literature that they were writing and putting into law, which is saying that Negroes are permanent slaves. Negroes are beasts. Negroes are, they're just, just walking around like men and everything, but they're like not on the same level. So they're like permanent underclass, right? Okay, and so it's this was being spoken of and recorded in history. Okay, this is not being made up. So when you hear the Moors going at it, we're not going at it for no reason. This is documented throughout history, and we're just getting started. The Portuguese usage is extremely significant, not only because American or part American slaves could be referred to as Negroes in early shipment records, but also because it very much affects one's analysis of population statistics in colonial Brazil, where in fact the categories of Negro and mulatto must have often included domesticated or enslaved Indians and mixed bloods. Okay, so even he's saying it's not just mixed bloods, they're part African, part indigenous. No, he's like saying it includes Indians, okay, full-blooded, all right, and because there really was because that's one thing that I want to hit on without getting too far off the point. You have people who go too far in one direction. Everybody's like, so happy to say that, hey, we're indigenous to here. We know who we are. And they're like, oh, no slaves came on. No one was enslaved from Africa. And it's like, no, it happened. Matter of fact, I mean, like, you do have some ship logs and real records of people. You even have people who have kept their lineage or who know where they came from over in the continent, in Africa. So, and like we've actually seen the catacombs, like the not the catacombs, but the dungeons, like they were under the street where they were keeping people who came in, like literally right there on the coast in the port, who were coming in from Africa in Brazil.
Post. The Pelourinho is translated into the whipping post, and that's where they broke the slaves.
I'm gonna put a screenshot for
all the slaves did not come from one place. There were slaves, people being made into slaves, indigenous people from foreign lands, and even people who were there free. At one point in time, captured and turned into a slave. They, did the same thing here. And another thing, like, you can only consider North America as America because when we were in Brazil, people were like, where are you from? We're like, America. They're like, well, this is America, So we also have to like broaden our understanding of things and understand other people are being taught different things than we are. Like we're all American, all the way from Canada down, to the tip of Brazil, you know, Central America, Mexico, the Caribbeans, all American.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm not gonna do the screen share, but I'm just saying, like, we've seen like the dungeons where they actually were keeping the prisoners of war, who were coming over from Africa and being enslaved. So yes, there was some mixing that was occurring, but there's also documents and things that show that there were people coming from different parts of Africa and trading with the Americans. So that was going on even before the Europeans came here. So we're not just trying to paint it with some ignorant brush, and say, oh, no one came from over there. It didn't happen. No, it did happen. Okay. It did. All right. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we were also over here as well. Okay. And I'm going to get back to where I left off. And we were just talking about what was occurring right there in Brazil. And like, even what it was saying, like, okay, the royalty there, they put out a decree, like, okay, we need to stop just calling the Indians Negros, but they did it like they came, the Portuguese came in the 1400s. Okay, so in 1755, nearly 300 years later, after the damage has been done, they put out a royal decree like, okay, well, when it's too late, after you've already decimated things and cut off people from their history of who they are, right? They already are Negroes now. They came from Africa, in addition to the people who came from Africa. So they don't know, and there really were people who came from Africa, though, in that part in Bahia. There was a huge Muslim slave revolt, and a lot of those people were Mende people, okay? So they were Moors, undoubtedly, from different regions of Africa, mostly West Africa, Mende people, and there's a huge Muslim slave revolt in Bahia. Okay, so they're mixing with the indigenous people who, for the most part, look just like them. But yeah, like after 300 years of doing this, they put out a decree like, okay, what we did was wrong. And yeah, we called them all Negroes, and they recorded it, so it's in history. We see that this actually happened. All right. So back to this. Insofar as the term Negro became synonymous with slave or servile status, it lost any specific color reference and became a general term of abuse. Darker people preferring to be called preto as a result, which preto is a Portuguese word just for black,
color black.
So they'd rather just be called the color black than Negro, because it was such an abusive term. Like, hey, Negro, it's a bad thing. It's a term of a slander. Okay, just like we recognize that now, it's slander. So it is highly likely that the Spaniards also referred to slaves generally as Negroes in the Caribbean. Okay. And that the Dutch took over the same general practice, since Negro and Neger were not Dutch words and had no immediate equivalent except zwart, donker, and bruin. A Dutch-French-Spanish dictionary in 1639 has the following entry for Spanish Negro: noir, sombre, obscur, offusque, brun, which is French, swart, donker, bruin. The Spanish Negro could be translated as dark or brown, as well as black, swart. Undoubtedly, this usage facilitated making reference to all slaves as Negroes or neggers in the Dutch language. Moreover, it is significant that a Spaniard residing in Antwerp in the early 17th century saw Negro as being translated in a number of ways, both Dutch and French. So, I mean, like, remember, this is coming from the Native American author, Jack D. Forbes. He's saying, look, the term Negro was just a general term of abuse, right? It was a term of abuse. It was a way, and when they're calling indigenous people Negroes, they're slandering them. They're trying to remove them from their heritage, okay? And they're doing this for a reason, because it's a land grab. We're coming in here, we're taking your stuff. You're not, whatever you say you are. You're what we say you are. By the latter half of the century, the English were referring to the people of Africa. Okay, by the latter half of the 16th century, the English were referring to the people of Africa as Ethiopians, Blackamoors, Negroes, and Moors, somewhat interchangeably. Negro gradually came to be the dominant term, especially after exhaustive contact with the Spanish and the Portuguese. What is not clear is the extent to which the term Negro was consciously translated as black. The automatic association of Negro with black color cannot be assumed since many black Africans are actually of medium brown or dark color. In any case, another association gradually rose, and that was between Negro and slave. So that eased it in from Negro, it just like meant slave, permanent slave status. Early legislation commonly referred to Negroes and other slaves or to Negro, mulatto, and Indian slaves. Over the years, Negro and black both became synonymous with enslavement. All right. And then, of course, you look, in the terminology that the government, the United States, uses to classify these people, these African Americans, African American, black, Negro, all of that stuff. You're the only people who's not connected to an original people, right? Okay. Everyone else is, you're not even connected to a people at all. You're just connected to the black racial groups of Africa. Black racial groups. Everyone else is connected to an original people. All right. So that's messed up. And this is all plain as day in our face. In 1702, an observer wrote that the wealth of Virginia consisted of slaves or Negroes. By 1806, Virginia judges ruled that a person who was of white appearance was to be presumed free. But in the case of a person visibly appearing to be of the slave race, it is incumbent upon him to make out his freedom. By 1819, South Carolina judges stated flatly the word Negro has a fixed meaning, slaves. Okay, so by 1806, Virginia judges ruled that if you appear white, you're soon to be free. But in the case a person appears to be of the slave race, you've got to fight for your freedom. You have to prove that you're not of the slave race.
And that right there.
And that would let you know, hey, this is why they're going to call the indigenous population part of that slave race, right?
But
we got to get them out that status.
Lincoln, in the court, that's why he fought for that more and won the case, because it's the same, it's the same problem. He's like, no, I'm not a Negro. And he had to fight for his right because he was a Moor, because he appeared to be a Negro, but he knew he wasn't a slave, and he knew he was a free man.
All right. So what the English meant by the term Negro when they first began to use it is not clear. Certainly it was not then synonymous with slave, as a great many persons so classified were free, both in England and in Virginia. Did it mean an African? So he's saying like there were a lot of free black people back then. So how could it have meant slave? They created that, they put these people into that status.
It was a spell.
Did it mean an African, a black person, or a dark-skinned individual? Today, the term is not widely employed in Britain, although the word black is used to refer to people of various skin colors from all of South Asia, the Middle East, the West Indies, and Africa. Most Native Americans, if living in Britain today, would be regarded as black, especially if their ancestry were not known. And this is Jack D. Forbes saying this. Is the same author that I was talking about earlier. Most Native Americans, if they were living in Britain today, okay, the original indigenous people, they would be regarded as black, especially if their ancestry were not known. He's like letting you know without just coming out and saying, well, yeah, the original indigenous people were black. He's letting you know, you're saying it without saying it how I would say it, but he's saying it right there in your face. Like if they were in Britain, they would be regarded black, because that's what they call these people in Britain now. You're from Jamaica or Nigeria or something like that, and you're living in Britain, they're calling you black, just like they do here, right? And so it's the same here. These people that they call black, Native Americans don't even know it. So Negro, and I mean, even that term Native American, understand what I'm saying. We have a nationality. We're Moorish Americans, but I'm making a point. We're the indigenous. Negro was also used in a general way in the North American colonies. Okay. Some examples illustrate the use of Negro and black as applied to people of American ancestry. And these examples are pretty amazing because, like I said, all this stuff is cited and these are real life cases. All right. Here's one that's real crazy, man. Listen to this. Pay attention, okay? Matter of fact, tag some people in this because what I'm about to share is pretty powerful. All right. Okay. An example from the West Indies is especially illuminating. Okay. Listen up, people. In 1764, William Young was sent to St. Vincent as a part of the British occupation of that island. Living on St. Vincent were about 3,000 Black Caribs, or free Negroes, about 100 Red Caribs, or Indians, and some 4,000 French and their slaves, according to Young. So some of them had already been declassified. The British found it difficult to control the Caribs, and wars were fought with them in 1771 and 1772, and again during 1795 and 96. During the latter crisis, Young wrote an extremely anti-Carib tract designed to prove that the Caribs should be removed from St. Vincent. They were eventually defeated, and some 5,000 were shipped to an island near the coast of Honduras. Listen to this. Young was anxious to prove that the so-called Black Caribs were not true Aborigines, but were in fact Negro colonists, free Negroes or Negro usurpers, troublemakers, maroons. This was important to him because he wanted to show that they had no bona fide land rights or aboriginal title. For our purposes, the interesting point admitted by Young is that the so-called Blacks or Negroes were occasionally of tawny and mixed complexion because of American ancestry, and that their customs, personal names, and language were those of the native Caribs. Still further, Young admitted that they had repeatedly intermarried with American women. He consistently refers to them as Negroes nonetheless. So even by his own admissions, they were whatever you want to call the indigenous population of the Americas. They were indigenous, autochthons, whatever you pronounce that word. Okay? Even by his own admission, they have the names, they have the customs, they have the language. You know, how many of you out there speak the indigenous American language? So they speak in the language, they have the names. Some of us might still have the names. These names that we think are ghetto, you know, these are indigenous sounding names, like especially if you actually look at roles of like indigenous that actually had the same first names and stuff, real indigenous names. A lot of our names that we think are ghetto are very indigenous sounding. So these people had the names, the customs, they look like them, they're eating like them. Okay, they're intermarrying with them repeatedly. It's like, dude, they're indigenous. How are they not indigenous? So it was like very biased against our people, right? And this is Jack D. Forbes isn't making this up. We have the sources cited listed on here on this site, so you can go in there and see for yourself. Moorsinamerica.com. Okay, so he wasn't making this up. This stuff that he's saying, this guy, his name was William Young. He's sent by the British to go in there and cause trouble amongst the indigenous people because they're trying to fight them and take that land from them. They want St. Vincent, okay? And they sent him in there with that purpose to, you know, cause ruckus. And that's what he did, okay? And this is telling you, I mean, like, it's plain as day. Let's see how St. Vincent and the Grenadines. How far is that from Florida? It's in the Caribbean. Okay, it's pretty far. Okay, it's kind of close to Dominica, in between Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Barbados. So it's kind of like in between there. So this is in the Caribbean, right? But this is something they did everywhere. And it says that eventually they were defeated and some 5,000 were shipped to an island near the coast of Honduras. So they're getting them, sending them off somewhere else as Negroes, which means they came from Africa. They can't. That means that technically these people now are
chattel.
Like everyone else comes from an original people. They come from a black racial group in Africa. Okay. And just
They
for
don't even
those who
say
haven't,
where.
yeah. So just for those who don't know what I'm talking about, will show
It's
this
the
real
Walmart
quick.
brand. It's the Great Value brand. Yeah. They don't tell you where you're from. You don't have.
Let's do a screen share real quick, because some of y'all might not even know what is this crazy dude talking about. What's he going on and on about these black racial groups and all this stuff? Okay, well, this is from opm.gov. All right. And this form, you can see this on the Census website, on IRS website, this form SF 181. These are government ethnicity and race identifications. These are their classifications. This is how they identify all the different ethnic groups, all right, in this country. So American Indian, if this is big enough, let me see if I can zoom in on here.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to zoom in and we're going to go down here. I'll just read this to the people on Facebook since you can't see the screen. But yeah, for racial category, American Indian or Alaskan Native, it says, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, and maintains tribal affiliation. All right. Just look up SF 181. Asian, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asia, Indian subcontinent. Listen to all these places: Philippines, Japan. I'm gonna read black last because that's the slave race. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or other Pacific islands. White, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Black or African American. Save the worst for last. A person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Any of the black racial groups. Everyone else is connected to an original peoples of somewhere in the world, but that black African American is having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. Not even a people, not even an original people, just a black racial group. What does that mean? Okay, so this is how they're removed. Okay, and once again, go to the website if you want to get more on this information, moorsinamerica.com. And we're reading from that excerpt from this book, Afro-Americans in the Far West. If you're just coming in, like, you can watch this and then rewind it back, because you don't want to miss what we're going in on, because you need to get the full picture. This is very important. I say everybody needs to put some effort forth into learning this so that you have a grasp on what really went down. Like, this is how it went down, and it's been documented. So you know that I'm not making this up. Like, you may hear me say some of this stuff, but I'm not making this up. Jack D. Forbes isn't making up a story about this guy, William Young, being sent to St. Vincent in 1764, where the British were occupying the land, trying to get that from the Black Caribs. He's not making this up, okay? These things are documented. And William Young, saying in his own words how the Black Caribs, who outnumbered everyone else, 3,000 Black Caribs, 100 red Caribs, which are basically mixed breeds. You know, you did have people who came over to Bering Strait. I don't know if they made it all the way down to the Caribbean. Excuse me, but you did have an intermixture. So you have 100 red Caribs, 3,000 Black Caribs, 4,000 some French and their slaves. The French came and already started some ruckus and have some that they got denationalized. Basically is what that is. So the Black Caribs outnumbered everyone. And he said they were eventually defeated, and some 5,000 were shipped to an island near the coast of Honduras. And I'm sure they were shipped off as Negroes coming from some black racial group of Africa. Okay. Denationalized.
Some unknown source.
Okay. Young was so anxious to prove that, I've read this before, but listen, he was so anxious to prove that the so-called Black Caribs were not true Aborigines, and that they were, in fact, Negro colonists. Okay? So Negroes were colonizing the land, too. They were Negro colonists, free Negroes, or Negro usurpers. This was important to him because he wanted to show they had no bona fide land rights or aboriginal title, man. That's what it's all about. Okay, there's an article on this same website talking about this. It's like the first article you see when you come there, and it says ancient Moors in America. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock because we were already here on the moorsinamerica.com site. It's on there, number one top article you see no matter what, because it's important. Everyone needs to get that and understand the internal slave trade is the biggest part of all this. Coming in, and as Jack D. Forbes said in his own words, get them out of their aboriginal title to the land, their land rights. Okay, that was the biggest thing. So you just painted everyone as Negro. Okay, and it goes on again. I'll say it again. For our purposes, the interesting point admitted by Young is that the so-called blacks or Negroes were occasionally of tawny and mixed complexion because of American ancestry, then that their customs, personal names, and language were those of the native Caribs. Okay, still like that today to a degree. Still further, Young admitted that they had repeatedly intermarried with American women. He consistently refers to them as Negroes nonetheless, even though everything about them says, hey, we're Caribs, that, they're indigenous. Young also relayed a great deal of hearsay information about how the Black Caribs had originated, which is without foundation for analysis here. The important point is this, that a people thoroughly American in identity, culture, and language were called Black and Negro solely because of being mixed with African ancestry. This tendency continues, incidentally, among white scholars who even today refuse to accept the Caribs' avowed feelings of Indianness and continue to call them Black. So, like, you're of Caribbean descent, okay? What happens every year, like around the same time throughout the Caribbean? Where
Carnival.
And how do the people of Caribbean descent dress?
In feathers, and like the natives in America, the tribes, they dress in tribal gear, feathers. And I mean, you've seen it in Labor Day parade in New York. They have all the West Indian, the West Indian parade and Labor Day. You just, you can see that on YouTube right now and see how everybody's dressing. Haitians, Dominicans, Jamaicans, or Bajans, Bohemians. It's like we're all same people. We celebrate in the same way, same culture.
All right, so yeah, the Caribbean people to this day are still carrying on in a matter that shows that they are the indigenous people, of the Americas, right?
The Tainos.
And as this is saying, the white scholars even to this day refuse to admit that or to acknowledge their Indianness. Okay. In 1619, some 20 Negroes were brought to Virginia. At least 11 had names of Spanish or probably Spanish character. Later, they were joined by Negroes and mulattoes with names such as Antonio, there were several Antonios, and John Pedro. These Spanish-derived servants could well have been of part American ancestry. However, no evidence is available except that they were largely secured from captured Spanish vessels. And so, like, once again, with that case that we were talking about with this infamous William Young, he's coming in there in St. Vincent, causing ruckus amongst the indigenous, saying that they're Negroes, putting out a campaigning to say these are Negroes. He's got all these wild out places that they came from, even though by his own account, they're very much indigenous, the way that they act, their customs and everything, their language, okay, which is huge. And so, but calling them Negroes nonetheless, and then eventually shipping them off somewhere else as Negroes. So they're just slaves. They're the slave race. All right. And so this is happening all over the place. And once you get branded Negro, you're just from one of those black racial groups in Africa. You're not even from an original people from Africa. You're just from one of those black racial groups. So that is like slander to the highest degree. Like, you do not want to be in that position. All right. In 1676, one Gowan, an Indian servant, acquired his freedom in Virginia. 2 decades later, Mihil Gowan, called a Negro, also acquired his freedom. It would appear that the Negro was probably father to the Indian in this case. Okay, so this is saying that, so 2 decades. Oh, okay, so say 1750s, you got some guy named Mehill Gowan, and he's considered a Negro, on paper. He acquires his freedom. 20 years later, an Indian servant also acquired his name was also Gowan. So this is like his son. His son is classified as an Indian. The father was classified as a Negro, right? That's just one case though. And this is in Virginia. Virginia was horrible with this. All right. In 1670, the population of the Virginia colony was said to be 40,000, including 2,000 black slaves. Evidence indicates that there could not have been that many Africans there, and also that there were a great many American slaves or servants. Thus, the total of blacks must have included a good many Americans. So it's like in 1670, there couldn't have possibly been a bunch of people of African descent in Virginia, just going off of the slave trade and how things were going on at that time. So he's saying like there's 2,000 black slaves. That means it may be 2,000 indigenous people who got, enslaved and put that slander on them, right? Don't call me black. That's slander. All right. In 1698, 3 fugitive Negroes were reported in North Carolina, of whom one was American. Similarly, a list of Negroes imported into Virginia 1710 to 1718 by sea includes at least 69 Indians, mostly from the Carolinas. Likewise, list of Negroes brought into New York from 1715 to 1736 included many slaves of probable or stated American ancestry from Campeche, Jamaica, Honduras, the Carolinas, and Virginia. And remember just what we were saying about this William Young dude, what he did with the Black Caribs in St. Vincent. They got shipped off somewhere off the coast of the Honduras, and they got shipped off as Negroes. Okay? All right? So keep this in mind, man. This is real. Nobody can refute this. And that's why I was showing Jack D. Forbes at the beginning to show you his credentials. Okay. All right. Jack D. Forbes, his credentials. I mean, this guy, you don't teach at UC Davis for 30 years. Okay. And write the handbooks for educators on, you don't do this for no reason. He's not just a nobody. Okay. And so we're reading from his works. And you can't refute it. It's irrefutable. People coming with YouTube internet scholarship can't refute it. Anyone who's trying to fight against this, you can't. All right. I'm gonna just read this again. Jack D. Forbes, professor of Native American Studies and Anthropology at UC Davis from 1969 to 1994. He's a Native American of Powhatan and Delaware background, Lenape background. Authored many books and articles, okay? And also wrote handbooks for teachers, okay? So, I mean, you can't refute it. I'm not making this up. I'm just reading it and providing commentary on it, okay? In 1715 through 1717, in this period, the Vestry Book of King William's Parish, Virginia, records one year, Robin an Indian, and 2 years later, Robin a Negro. Okay, so from 1715 through 1717, all right, in that same King William's Parish in Virginia, it records that 1 year Robin an Indian, and then 2 years later Robin a Negro. In a similar matter, in 1691, there's a list of Negro slaves in York County, Virginia. It includes Kate Indian, while a 1728 list of Negroes in the same and at the home house of a Virginia planter includes Indian Robin. Robin, incidentally, is a common name for slaves of American ancestry. In 1748, there was an advertisement in New York for a Negro manservant called Robin, almost of the complexion of an Indian, talks good English, can read and write, and plays on the fiddle.
Wow.
All right.
That was a 12 years slave dude.
Yeah, basically. Okay. In 1723, Virginia adopted a law depriving free Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians of certain basic civil rights. The act was disallowed by British officials, but in 1735, Lieutenant Governor Gooch defended it by asserting that he wanted to make a perpetual brand upon free Negroes and mulattoes by excluding them from that great privilege of a free man. He wanted to make the free Negroes sensible that a distinction ought to be made between their offspring and the descendants of an Englishman. I'm going to go back and read this because these are quotes, okay? I'm not making this up. These are quotes, okay, from the lieutenant governor, okay? In Virginia, there was a 1923 law that got adopted depriving free Negroes, mulattoes, and Indians of certain basic civil rights. Listen, the act was disallowed by British officials. But in 1735, Lieutenant Governor Gooch defended it by asserting that he wanted to make a perpetual brand upon free Negroes and mulattoes by excluding them from that great privilege of a free man. That's his quote. Okay. He wanted to make the free Negroes sensible that a distinction ought to be made between their offspring and the descendants of an Englishman with whom they were never were to be accounted equal, end quote. Okay. So this is like done on paper in record. Since the act applied to Native Americans and half Americans, mulattoes, Gooch's language would seem to include them under the general category of free Negroes and mulattoes. All right. A welcome clarification of terminology was provided in 1719 by the government of South Carolina when it decided, and for preventing all doubts and scruples that may arise, what ought to be taxed on musties, mulattoes, etc. All such slaves as are not entirely Indian shall be accounted as Negro. The significance of this act is that all later enumerations of Negro and Indian slaves in South Carolina have to be analyzed with the thought in mind that many Negroes were probably one half or other fractions of American ancestry. Okay, so this is just going across the board. They're just going down like getting them all. All the indigenous are being classified as Negroes. Okay, and once again, as I said earlier, it's not saying there weren't any people who were like captured or POWs, enslaved, you know, brought here from Africa. But when you take into account that 5,000 Caribs were sent from their home in St. Vincent in the Caribbean, just off the coast of the Honduras, and they were shipped off as Negroes. This William Young dude spent all this time dedicating his life to declassifying them, to, you know, slandering them as Negroes. And then they finally get shipped off as they, you know, they lost the war, the battle they were in with the British.
It was the internal slave trade, and it was bureaucracy that made it happen.
Yeah, so you had actual fighting going on, and then you had, you know, paperwork and semantics and games being played to declassify, to denationalize these people.
And I'm glad you said paperwork, because I think that's where, you know, the Moors are coming into knowledge of self, and then they assume that because it happened to us on paper, that they had to go back and pay for this paperwork to undo it. But it doesn't work that way, because Noble Drew Ali, the prophet, set up the temples so that you can go into the temple and nationalize that way, point blank.
Okay, so definitely. Now, in New Jersey was also an area where Americans and Africans intermixed with considerable frequency. In 1734, an advertisement appeared for the recovery of Juan, W-A-N. Maybe it was supposed to be Juan, like J-U-A-N. He is half Indian and half Negro. He plays the fiddle and speaks good English and is country Indian. Juan was not specifically called a Negro, but a 1747 advertisement reads, "Runaway on the 20th of September last from Conhancy, a very lusty Negro fellow named Sampson, aged about 53 years and had some Indian blood in him. And he had with him a boy about 12 or 13 years of age named Sam, was born of an Indian woman and looks like an Indian, only his hair. They both talk Indian very well, and it is likely they have dressed themselves in the Indian dress and gone to Carolina." So it's talking about a runaway
He looks
slave.
like an Indian, but only his hair.
Okay,
It must have been kinky.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I mean, how could this dude, this Negro, about 53 years old, named Samson, um, blend in with the Indians just by dressing like them.
Right.
You know, how could he do that unless the Indians
look like Moors?
All right, because he even admits he had some Indian blood in him. He speaks the Indian language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he speaks English and the Indian language, and he can just blend in with them. So it's letting you know, like, hey, we look like Indians. You look like an Indian. My mom looks like an Indian. Dad's, you know, all these people look like Indians. All right, people in our families look like Indians because that's what they were. You know, well, that's the term that was placed on them. We're Moorish Americans, okay? But if you see all of this and you understand how we're denationalized and pulled, you know, and stripped of, you know, who we really are, then you should understand now why it's important. Moorish nationality is real. We have legitimate claim to it. Why it's important to get back to that, okay? And that's also why Noble Drew Ali said that we suffer because we did not honor our mothers and fathers. We strayed after the gods of the Europeans, right? They have a religion that was created for them, you know, to civilize them or for their earthly salvation. Why are we practicing it? Makes no sense, right? So, all right. Yeah. Similarly, in 1778, there's an advertisement that says, was stolen from her mother, a Negro girl about 9 or 10 years of age named Diana. Her mother's name is Cash, was married to an Indian named Lewis Wallace, near 6 feet high, about 35 years of age. They have a male child with them between 33 and 4 years of age. Any person who takes up the said Negroes and Indian shall have the above reward. Okay? All right. From these examples, we can see that people of mixed American African ancestry could be called Negroes in New Jersey. Cyrus Bustill, a Philadelphia baker, black, born in 17, married a Delaware Indian woman. His son became a Quaker and an anti-slavery leader and was known as a Negro. Okay? And so this is what's going on all the time. This guy Cyrus already had been classified as a Negro, okay? And he married an Indian woman, and their son was classified as a Negro. In Canada, in 1747, 4 Negroes and a Panis, which in parentheses says American slave, escaped from Montreal. A French writer referred to them simply as Negroes. In 1759, one Saunders, a runaway slave, was described in South Carolina as a Negro man of the musty breed. A musty meant either European American or European American African. All right? It's like Creole. In 1775, authorities in South Carolina were ordered to apprehend John Swan, a reported free Negro or mestizo man. In the 1780s, certain white Virginians began to agitate for the termination of the Ginkaskin Indian Reservation in Northampton County. The reserve was described as an asylum for free Negroes, and it was alleged that the Americans have at length become nearly extinct, there being at this time not more than 3 or 4 genuine Indian at most. The place is a harbor and convenient asylum for an idle set of free Negroes. In 1812, it was argued that the place is now inhabited by as many black men as Indians. The Indian women have many of them married black men, and a majority probably of the Indians are blacks or have black blood in them. The real Indians are few. The reserve was allotted in 1813, and by 1832, whites had acquired most of it. In 1828, the Ginkaskin descendants were described as respectable Negro landowners. All right. So they went from, I mean, like this is showing the word games they were playing even back then. Okay. Because it's like, if you go to like in Florida, we used to live in Florida, right? And we had I had done work like graphic arts work for these the Seminole Indians, okay? And the Seminole Indians that we were dealing with were like straight up Europeans. You know what I'm saying? But this, according to these accounts, like, I mean, if you got one black parent and one Indian parent, you're a Negro. plain and simple. You know, it's not held to the same standards. Even going by that, if they want to act like all of the people that look like us were brought over from Africa, okay, even going off of those standards, these people are keeping the customs. They're married in, and they don't even get to acknowledge that you're just a Negro, plain and simple. But by the opposite standards, you could be like pale and calling yourself whatever Indian tribe you want, and you're good. You can even collect the government check. But the burden of proof is on you if it's the other way around, though, right? It's a lot harder for a Negro to do that. And this also shows like how a lot of Negroes own land. Okay, they had never been enslaved. How did they come into this? How were they owning land? This episode reminds one of Young's attack upon the Caribs of St. Vincent in 1795. All right, remember we were talking about Young, all that work he did to denationalize the Caribs in St. Vincent. Okay, so this reminds you of the attacks upon the Caribs of St. Vincent in 1795, and also of more recent attempts to allot and acquire Indian lands. A similar attack took place upon the Pamunkey Mattaponi in 1843, which failed, and against the Nottoway from 1830 to 1878, which seceded. By the 1840s, at least 2 Nottoways were registered as free Negroes. The heirs of one family were described in 1878 as all being Negroes and very poor, and that's a quote. Okay? So this is saying by the 1840s, at least 2 Nottoways were registered as free Negroes. And then the heirs of one family were described as being all Negroes and very poor. And that reminds me of like what happened to the Montauk tribe in New York on the East Coast, right? The Montauk tribe, which there's a very good short documentary on this channel about that, where we go in on that. There was a case like you had a land dispute, like all of the land where like all the rich people like to go, like in the Hamptons, okay. Is it Long Island too? Okay, the Hamptons, all that area. That's Montauk land. Okay. And so before the Europeans had that, this was all set aside. They had an agreement with the government, hands off. This is Montauk land perpetually, forever, right? Set aside for them. And so what happened was you had some of the settlers, some of the colonists, that were like preying on that land. They made side deals with some of the janky tribe members, who like maybe didn't have all their stuff together. Like, okay, I'll give you some money for this land, right? And they tried to take all the land. And what happened was the tribal chiefs and the council got together. They had a chief named Wyandotte Pharaoh, right? The Pharaoh family, which is still alive to this day. They still had their lineage, and they look like us, okay? And so, not to put all their business out there, but this is like recorded in history. It's a known. Historians know this. It's known. This is a tragedy. What happened to the Montauks? Okay, even though they don't teach you about this in school, it's a known fact. So, what happened with the Montauks was, okay, there were these little side deals with certain Montauk tribe members to get the land, and what they did was the colonizers tried to take all of that land based off of these side deals they had made. The chief comes in like, oh, heck no, you can't do this. We didn't agree to this. The council didn't agree to this, so it's null and valid. And he took it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So in the New York Supreme Court, he goes in, and there's a judge named Abel Blackmar, right? And he basically calls, the chief up to the trial, and he has a bunch of different Europeans that lived in the area come up and describe him, and they're all like saying, well, I thought he was a Negro. I always thought he was a Negro. Everybody's saying, oh, he's black. He's a mulatto. This, and that. Everybody's calling him black or Negro or mulatto, right? And they're like all saying that he's not an Indian, basically. Okay, even though even the people of European descent in that area, they all knew he was a tribal chief. They even called him that. When they see him, they call him old chief, or hey, it's the chief. Everybody knew he's the chief of the Montauk, and that all the Montauk look like us and darker, right? Undeniably. Okay. And so what happened was they use these testimonies from all these different Europeans who have a reason to be acting like this. They want to get that land, right? And they're all saying that he's a Negro. He's a Negro. That is slander, man. And so they all did that, and the judge declared the Montauk Indians extinct, even though the tribe was in the courtroom at the time, right? So they've got at least like 40 tribal members in there, and their chief is in there, okay? And his sister's name was Pocahontas Pharaoh, okay? And forget, I'm gonna go on and do a screen share, just describe it for everybody on Facebook since you can't see this. But basically, Wyandotte Pharaoh, without a doubt, he's a brother, and Pocahontas, without a doubt, was a sister. Okay, and so the whole tribe is in there, or a bunch of tribal members are in there. The chief is sitting there on trial, and they declared them extinct, right there, with them sitting in the trial,
in the room.
In the room, baby. And guess who the land goes to? And so now you can't even afford to live in the Hamptons, you know. And so we're gonna do this screen share too for YouTube so that y'all can see this. And I mean, I advise you to go and watch the video on the channel, and you need to share it. It's I can't remember the exact title. Black Indians. Is it? Even though we know the term black is slander. From Indian to black or civiliter mortus. They had to put something educational in there for you to know. I'm a Moor, man. Got to let you know black, means legally dead. Okay, so this is the video. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, you need to get on there. It's on the Facebook page too. You need to share it. This needs to get out. This is very important information that people don't know. Yes. This needs to be viral. It needs to have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of views, man. If our people knew about this, they would be ready to do something about it, to change our situation, okay? So you need to see that even more so than this. This is a great video too, but this and that need to be combined together. So if you haven't seen it, watch it and share that, okay? From Indian to black or civiliter mortus. And it's on Facebook too. Watch it on YouTube, then go on Facebook and tag everybody in it, okay?
Instead of
and these are the
watching
pictures.
Netflix or whatever, get your friends and family together and watch this video, and then go in on this information, because this is real for us. So
what is this a picture of? This is the Montauk royal family. This is the Montauk tribe royal family, reclassified to Negro, and the Montauk tribe was declared extinct in the Supreme Court. That's Pocahontas Pharaoh right there, right? And I think that's Wyandotte. So if you on Facebook, you can't see this right now, but you can go to YouTube and watch this later. Yeah, y'all need to help this go viral. You hear the information, you know this is powerful and important. And I mean, just like, this is sickening. It's crazy. And the only thing we can do about it is get the awareness up. Okay, I don't need to be the only one knowing this. It's not good enough if it's just me. You guys need to help share. We need to get this out, man. It's not just about everybody seeing me, because I won't even be in the video, but the information needs to be out there. That's what's really important, okay? So that's why I'm sharing this, and also why we're reading. So I had gotten off onto that because we basically was describing what happened to the Nottaways. Okay, they were describing the actual Nottaways as all being Negroes and very poor. There was a tribe of heirs. The heirs of one family were described in 1878 as all being Negroes and very poor. Okay, the Nottaway Indians and Pa Monkey. I think that's what Chris Brown, the singer, said. He's a Pa Monkey, and this is all in that Virginia area. Okay, aside from Virginia, where persons descended from female Americans imported after a certain date could obtain their freedom. Okay, all slaves of American ancestry remained slaves throughout the entire duration of slavery unless they were emancipated or ran away. At the end of the 18th century, Bob, a carpenter fellow of a yellowish complexion, musty, has bushy hair, ran away. He was said to speak more proper than Negroes in general. Okay. Other persons of American ancestry who were free also were called black or Negro. Paul Cuffey. We'll talk about Paul Cuffey in a second. Paul Cuffey, the noted half American, half African merchant, was called at various times an Indian, a black man, and this free and enlightened African. He signed petitions with Indian men and all free Negroes and mulattoes. Other examples of a similar nature abound. One author writes, the Sampsons and Galleys, property owners and school teachers, though predominantly of Indian blood, were leaders among the free Negroes of Petersburg, Virginia in 1860. So this is saying this is a family or two families. The Sampsons and Galleys, property owners and school teachers, though predominantly of Indian blood, were leaders among the free Negroes of Petersburg, Virginia in 1860. So why are these people who are, property owners, school teachers, Indians, okay? Why were they leaders among the free Negroes in 1860 in Virginia, right? Why? Because these free Negroes are indigenous too. These are their people. All right? And like the brother, Jack D. Forbes, commend him for putting this information out. He can't say it like I can, But I'm telling you this. He put in a lot of work. He put his life's work into this. So much respect to him. All right. But this is like reading between the lines and just being real about it. Like, it is what it is. Okay. Even from the information that he gives you, all of these people didn't come from Africa. Okay. We're not knocking it. If you watch the beginning of the video, you get some more information about that. Okay. And, okay, Virginia tax rolls and census records from the 1780s to 1850 have numerous examples of people of Indian tribal identity being classified as free people of color or as mulattoes. Numerous examples of people of Indian tribal identity being classified as free people of color or mulattoes. In fact, the practice was almost universal. Some were also classified as FN, free Negro, or B, black, in various records. In certain counties, such as Southampton, this is in Virginia, in 1830, and in parts of Delaware, virtually all free non-whites were classified as FN, that's free Negro, although enumerated under the free people of color column. These lists included people of Nanticoke and other tribal groups, okay? So, just looking throughout history, American history, there's so many times where there's so many examples of people who were basically free Negroes. Like, where did all these free Negroes come from? What are all these free Negroes doing in the 1600s? Okay, like before they even had what allegedly, like what we're told from the slave trade, before they even had brought this many Africans up into North America, what are all these free Negroes doing there? Okay, free people of color. All right, and then I was talking about Paul Cuffey earlier. He was a Wampanoag Indian, and his father was Ashanti, captured and sold into slavery. One of the heroes from the American Revolution. Who was the first person to die in the American Revolution? You remember his name? Yeah, this crazy sounding name. Yeah, Crispus Attucks. It's a crazy sounding name. Crispus Attucks was of Wampanoag descent. They teach us he was the first African to die, the first black person to die. Okay, he was of Wampanoag descent. Okay, he was an indigenous American. But anyway, back to this. I'm gonna read some more. Under certain conditions, persons of African descent could be legally classified as members of an Indian tribe or as Indians. In a treaty with the Creek Nation, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs noted in 1832, an Indian, whether full or half-blood, who has a female slave living with him as his wife, is the head of a family and entitled to a reservation of land. Also, free blacks who have been admitted as members of the Creek Nation and are regarded as such by the tribe, if they have families, are entitled to reservations of land. Okay, so even by their own standards that we are taught, like blacks coming into the tribe, they're still supposed to be regarded as Indians, right? No, they go back and erase all of that. During the Seminole Wars, a new term seems to have been coined, that of Indian Negroes. One source, General Wiley Thompson, asserted in 1835 that they are descended from the Seminoles and are connected by consanguinity. Other writers refer to them as the hostile Negroes and mulattoes in the Seminole Nation, or simply Indian Negroes. Few white writers seem to have continued the use of Indian Negro. However, in the Yuchi language, mixed people of that type were referred to as Goshpi Chala, or red black
people. It's funny
how
they say hostile because you're fighting back against the stuff that's happening to you. It's like,
yeah.
They think they're
What's
slick.
up? What's up, Evans? In North Carolina, many people of Lumbee Indian identity were categorized at times as Negroes. And there's a coach, a college basketball coach. He coaches Houston. What's his name? What's that dude's name, man? Get the Houston basketball coach. What's his name, man? Kelvin Sampson. Okay. Now, Kelvin Sampson is of Lumbee descent. I'm going to just show y'all him. Okay. All right. Like, I know about him because I follow basketball. So this is Kelvin Sampson. He's of Lumbee descent. Now, if you're watching on Facebook, you can't see him. Look him up. Kelvin Sampson, Houston basketball coach, right? He actually is the head coach of the college team now. Okay. And he's a brother, like he's a brother. His father, I think, like fought for civil rights. I don't remember all the aspects of it. All right. Let me see. Okay, so Kelvin Sampson, he's the head coach right now of the Houston Cougars, University of Houston. He was born in the Lumbee Indian community in North Carolina, right? And I think his dad was a basketball coach too. His father was one of 500 Lumbee Native Americans who made national news by driving the Ku Klux Klan out of Maxton, North Carolina. All right. This is annually celebrated by the Lumbee as the Battle of Hayes Pond. This is why I'm sharing this, right? So like his father's like kind of known in history throughout them. So this is annually celebrated by the Lumbee in North Carolina, the Battle of Hayes Pond. So his father did this, they helped to drive out the Ku Klux Klan. Okay. And I mean, if you look at him, you can tell he's a brother. And I'm not just saying that to concentrate on one person. I'm just saying, like, even until this day, you do still have some people who are undeniably brothers and sisters who have kept their Indian heritage alive, right? Like for most of us, it's just oral history passed down. And okay, your grandfather, your grandmother, yeah, we had Indian in them. And there's a whole lot of confusion that comes along with that. Okay. But I was just sharing that because that was just one aspect. We heard about the Lumbees just now. And like literally, the Lumbees were battling the KKK. What are they doing? Why are they battling the KKK? Same reason all of us were. Okay. All right. This was going on in this Jim Crow period. Okay. They didn't care if you were calling yourself Indian or not. All right. To them, you're black, you're Negro. Okay. So in North Carolina, many people of Lumbee Indian ancestry were categorized at times as Negroes. In 1837, Charles Oxendine of Robeson County was punished as a free Negro. All right. In 1842, one of the Brave Boy family was called a Negro, while in 1857, a Chavers was charged as a free person of color with carrying a shotgun. Blacks and Negroes can't do stuff like that. He was not convicted because the act specified free Negroes and he was charged as a free colored. The court stated that free persons of color may be persons colored by Indian blood. The indictment cannot be sustained. Wow. So they're saying person of color can be persons colored by Indian blood. Wow. And this is all in colorable law, man. This is crazy. In a similar situation, some white men took away guns from the Pamunkey people in Virginia, 1857. The governor had them returned, but stated, if any become 1/4 mixed with the Negro race, then they may be treated as free Negroes or mulattoes. Virginia at this time defined a mulatto as 1/4 or more African. And if you read into stuff like this, you see why they would have more incentive to mix with people of European descent versus their own people, you know? Because even in this law in Virginia, it's saying if they become mixed with even 1/4 mixed with the Negro race, then they may be treated as free Negroes or mulattoes. And aside the fact that they're coming in trying to switch you up and to categorize you as Negroes anyway, right? So they could just come in at any point in time, you know, with that BS, that slander. In Louisiana in 1856, the Black Code was said to refer to offenses involving slaves, Indians, and free persons of color. Many narratives of ex-slaves recorded in the 1830s reveal Indian ancestry. One such person, called an Indian, was Uncle Mobile Hobson of Virginia. He says, "It come time to marry and marry a black woman. That make me black, I suppose." So he's saying, okay, this Indian Uncle Hobson, Mobile Hobson of Virginia, he's going to marry a black woman, and he knows that's going to make him be classified as black too. And in 1871, a white writer of Maryland observed in Dorchester County at Indian Creek, some of the last Indians of the peninsula struck their wigwams towards the close of the last century, and there are now no full-blooded Aborigines on the eastern shore, although many of the freeborn Negroes show Indian traces. Quite commonly, however, some of the freeborn Negroes of the eastern shore continue to identify and survive as native people. Okay, so the whites often try to deny their Indianness. That's what he's saying. Like, he's saying, okay, there's no more full-blooded Aborigines. It's just free Negroes. They're not slaves in 1830s, 1871. They're free-born Negroes. They're born free, and they have Indian traces. And for some reason, they're still surviving and identifying as the indigenous, as the native people. And this is some European man saying this. He's full of it, you know? The whites often tried to deny their Indianness, as in 1856, when a marker was erected to commemorate a woman who had testified that the Nanticoke people of Delaware had African ancestry. The Indians were referred to on the marker as arrogant Negroes that assumed to be what they were not. So it's saying there was a marker erected to commemorate some woman that testified that those Nanticoke people of Delaware were, because the Nanticoke Moors, you can actually look this up, okay? The government, in many cases, classified the Nanticoke Indians as Moors, and this lady was remarking on that, and it's saying that on that same marker, they referred to them as arrogant Negroes that assumed to be Indians, assumed to be what they were not, okay? So they're always trying to remove them from their heritage, okay? And this is still going on to this day. And I just wanted to point that out because, you know, it's crazy. The Nanticoke Moors, the Moors of Delaware. You can actually look this stuff up online. The Nanticoke Moors. There's a ton of information on this. Basically, since the 1700s, they've been referred to as Moors, the Delaware Moors. Okay, and maybe we could speak on that a little later. And actually, there's other videos on this channel that go in on that.
Showing how it's tied in.
During the 18th century, most persons of mixed race, especially if they were free, were classified as Negro, mulattoes, musties, or persons of color. Okay, so they didn't even want to, like, you know, call them indigenous. You know, they just said they were mulattoes. You know, they're persons of color, just musties. They're mixed. The term Negro was less likely to be used for such people, except as noted in the examples above. This usage continues in some states, such as the Carolinas and Virginia, well into the 19th century. So the usage above, what he's saying, they're less likely to refer to these free people as Negroes. They will call them people of color, free person of color. The only time they called them Negroes was when they were trying to disparage the ones who were still carrying on their tribal traditions, who were still living as Indians. They were like, well, they're pretending to be Indians. I don't know why they're pretending. They're just Negroes, you know? And so, like, it's just crazy. For example, the jurist of South Carolina noted in 1852, it is not according to the use of language in this region to speak of one altogether black as a person of color. The phrase is almost exclusively applied to one of mixed blood and color. A change took place in such states in Indiana, Kentucky, and elsewhere, as the term Negro came to encompass most persons of part African descent. Yeah. This change may not have affected people of solely African and American descent, especially if the African ancestry predominated. Since many, but not all Native Americans were brown or dark colored without African ancestry, their descendants, when mixed only with African blood, would very likely be seen as Negroes by most Europeans. And this is what Jack D. Forbes is saying. Especially in North America, where special terms for such persons such as Zombo, Grifo, Lobo, Kafuso, Cabra never became current. Okay, and remember, and when we first started reading this and talking about how in Brazil they called the colonists called the Indians Negros da Terra. Terra, Terra, means land. Negroes of the land. Okay, and I mean, and they did it for like 300 years before they finally said, "Oh, we were messing up. Sorry about that." Admitted their fault when there's nothing that can be done about it. The damage been done. 300 years of doing that, they've cut off people from their heritage. Probably shipped people to all different parts of Brazil and maybe even to other places. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's kind of like just like say they want to apologize for slavery now and just give it lip service. Hey, damage already been done. The United States Census also tended to expand the use of the terms Black or Negro. In 1890, okay, which is, hey, listen, I'm going to hit back on that real quick. Okay, hang on with me, bear with me a minute. Okay, so, all right, what I just said was, all right, the United States U.S. Census also tended to expand the use of the terms Black or Negro. Okay, and that's kind of what's going on now. What you hear people talking about the 2020 census and how they're going to, ask people that are white or Black to define what that means, to go even more in depth. So it may not be all in our favor. I'm just telling people to be aware of that. All right. In 1890, Black was to be used for all persons having 3/4 or more Black blood. In 1910, Black was supposed to be applied only to full-blooded Negroes, while the matter of who was an Indian was left to the enumerator, whoever's there to take the census. They were like, well, don't look like a Negro. Don't look like an Indian to me. They just put Negro. Okay. The term mulatto was to be used for all other persons having some proportion or perceptible trace of Negro blood. It is certain that large numbers of Americans or part Americans were classified as Negro or mulatto under these rules. For example, of the Mattaponi, only one person was counted as Indian by the census out of a reservation population of at least 40 persons. So they're saying on the reservation, only one person was actually counted as an Indian, right? The rest, they'd be like, mulatto, that's a Negro, Black, all right? The Puspatuck of Long Island had only one person counted as Indian, doubtless because the rest were enumerated as Negroes or mulattoes. The 1910 census counted 2,255 Negroes, who were part Indian or were enrolled members of tribes. All right. They were tribe members and they were still being counted as Negroes. Another group of 1,793 tribal members were of mixed European, African, and American ancestry. Thus, only slightly more than 3,000 persons who were part African were counted with the Indian population as compared with the hundreds of thousands who were doubtlessly counted as Negro or mulatto because of living away from a federally recognized reservation area. So this is coming from the brother Jack D. Forbes. He's saying in 1910, like hundreds of thousands, of people are being counted as Negro or mulatto because they don't live on a reservation, a federally recognized reservation. Okay, so he's admitting, like, hey, all these people, they're American indigenous. In 1930, a person of mixed Indian and Negro blood shall be returned as a Negro unless the Indian blood predominates and the status as an Indian is generally accepted in the community. And that's what they did to the Montauk's, had the community, but only the ones of European descent come to the court. And they're all, even though they call him chief, they call him king or chief. When he's coming through the community, everybody calls him chief or king. So they know he's the chief of the Montauk Indians, but they're like, nah, he's a Negro, he's a mulatto, so that they can get that land. By 1940, and this is all documented, man, all documented, people. By 1940, all African American hybrids were to be counted as Negroes unless the Indian ancestry was very definitely predominates and he is universally accepted as an Indian. Wow. So, like, what do you have to look like to be universally accepted as an Indian? You have to look like Tonto, right? Anybody, y'all know what Tonto is? What was that dude? The Lone Ranger, Tonto, right? So you got to look like in the movie, Johnny Depp played Tonto. So you have to look like Johnny Depp to be accepted as an Indian. Like, Johnny, what the hell? That makes no sense, right? This isn't even how the Indians, I'm using this term because of what I'm reading, but this isn't even how they're described. They're described as dark brown skin, copper skin tone people. Even from Indian, the foremost scholar, Indian Native American scholar, the expert on Native American history would tell you that. Jack D. Forbes. Even pure blood Indians could be counted as blacks. All right, this is Jack D. Forbes telling you this. Even pure blood Indians could be counted as blacks, as in Nevada, all the way out in Nevada. In 1880, when the census enumerator categorized 90 members of the Duckwater Shoshone tribe in that manner. In the state of Delaware, more recent decades found that if a person said he was an Indian, he was recorded as either black or white, depending on his appearance. The 1980 census was so arranged that any American African mixed blood who checked both black and Indian boxes was counted solely as black, right? And what was happening in the 80s, man? That's when Jesse Jackson came through and he blessed us with this title of African American, to help get us further away from who we actually are. Okay, so this is crazy. I mean, like I said, the expert, Jack D. Forbes, he's telling you, hey, even pure blood Indians could be counted as black. And he says in 1880 in Nevada, that's what happened. Categorized 19 members of the Duckwater Shoshone tribe as black. All right. And in Delaware, in recent decades, they found that if a person said he was Indian, he was recorded as either black or white, depending on his appearance. All right. And wow, I mean, what more do you need to know? In summary, it seems clear that many persons of Native American ancestry, in whole or part, have been at times classified as Negroes or black. This is a matter of considerable significance for the scholar seeking to understand the actual ethnic or racial identity of non-white persons in the North American, British colonies, and in the United States over the centuries. You can't ignore this. If you want to know anything about history, if you really want to approach this and be honest about it, if you really want to get to the bottom of it, to understand what's going on, you cannot ignore this. All right. All right. So the evidence is overwhelming. There's no evidence. It's the truth. Earlier studies have shown the significance of the terms mulatto, musty, sambo, zombo, and colored as indicating persons of American or possible American ancestry. Collectively, these studies serve to show the probability of a much greater degree of intermixture between Africans and Native Americans than has heretofore been widely acknowledged. Okay, so once again, yeah, we're reading from this book. You guys need to share this. Everything in here has the sources, and even on the moorsinamerica.com website where you can read this article, the link is in the description. You can get more information on it from there. And I mean, like we said, we're not making any of this stuff up. Okay. And of course, it might be argued that this is old hat, especially to people in the African American community who have long been aware of extensive Indian ancestry. This is only new to people who are new to this, you know? This is new to outsiders, maybe. Okay. My grandfather told me that he's Blackfoot. His father is Blackfoot. His father owned a whole bunch of land in Tennessee too, you know, had a farm, had it going on. And it's like, what they probably, I would have to go and see, but he probably would have been classified as a free Negro or person of color, you know? Who knows though, right? So this is what was going on. You had free people of color owning land, Moors, all right? Indigenous Americans. Okay, so he's saying, hey, the Afro-American community has been knowing this, okay? And they've been aware of extensive Indian ancestry and who have, at least since the Civil War, self-consciously utilized the terms of Negro or Black, and of course colored, to encompass people of mixed Native American and African descent. Individuals such as Ann Plato, Paul Cuffey, Crispus Attucks, Hiram Revels, and many others have long been referred to as Negroes, in spite of having perhaps at least as much Native American and African as African ancestry, and even when living in Indian communities, as was the case with Attucks and Cuffey. So as I said earlier, man, Crispus Attucks, who they tell us was the first, you know, African American to die, and he was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War. They don't tell you he lived in an Indian community and he was a Wampanoag. They don't tell you any of that, right? So they're leaving out a lot. Okay. And like I'm not saying this, Jack D. Forbes is. From the scholarly perspective, the logic of white racism, which is tended to classify people in very arbitrary ways, is neither the logic of genetics nor of bona fide ethnicity. The mixture of African and American does not make a person Black or Negro any more than it makes one automatically Indian. Ethnic scholars must aver that it is both pernicious and dangerous to read into the evidence and to affirm for earlier times the pronouncements of a dominant social caste. Their myths, their prejudices, and their systems of classification and nomenclature must all be subjected to critical and imperial reevaluation. So what he's trying to do is he's trying, because this is from a handbook that's for educators, okay? What he's trying to do is to enlighten them, to let them know that, like, you know, because even by then, like, let's see when this came out. Okay, hang on. When was this published? Hang on a second. This may be from the 60s. It says 1965. So he was trying to look, because even by then, by this time, you know, things had been messed up. All right. They had almost completely eradicated, you know, who we are as a people, and had established we're Afro-Americans. Okay, and even though most people at this point in time still, you still had those remnants of collective histories, oral histories of us having Indian heritage, which some people didn't even pass down. Okay, some people didn't even pass this down, but he's trying to relay this information. Okay, and he's trying to let other educators know about this so they could deal with it and put it in the proper perspective. All right. And oh, wow, the significance of the Afro American people. Americans of African descent or Afro Americans comprise one of the most significant groups of people to be found in the Americas, perhaps 100 million strong. And you never hear that. They always say it's like 40 million of us, right? Afro Americans dominate the population of most of the Caribbean republics. I mean, come on, man. The entire Caribbean, is us. And we do the carnival, and dress like Indians. Come on, man. They just replaced the whole population with these people from Africa. Yeah, right. Right. So they dominate the Caribbean, all right, and constitute a sizable portion of the citizenry of Brazil, which I've seen with my own eyes. There's more Moors in Brazil than it is here in North America. Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and the United States. And he left out Belize. Belize is majority dark skinned, brothers and sisters. Significant strains of African ancestry is also to be found among the people of Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, and elsewhere. But in these countries, the African component is often already absorbed or is rapidly disappearing into the general population. Okay, so I'm just sharing this to help get this information out, to help change perspectives, and this is coming from a scholarly perspective. Everything is cited, you know. You can look this stuff up for yourself if you want to see some of the sources where the material I was reading, especially the things about like William Young going into the St. Vincent Islands and trying to slander and decimate the Black Caribs. Okay, that stuff is in here, so you can go in here and you can get all those sources, especially because it's kind of hard to find this book. It's out of print. Okay, and let's see. All right, critique. This article is well written and researched. The author has searched the literature pertaining to Blacks and Indians and found that there are many cases of confused and deliberate distortions. These distortions had and have a profound impact on the way we behave to this day. Many examples of the use and of overgeneralization are given. The reasons for this behavior are complex and varied. As an example, we find the white Virginians agitating for the termination of the Ginkaskin Indian reservations in Northampton County. Forbes cites the reason for this agitation as the area was an asylum for free Negroes. Okay, and the presence of Indians was small, if any, and the date for this event is given as 1780. So they're coming in and saying, well, the Indians are gone. It's just Negroes. And what are Negroes? Rewind back, look earlier in the video where we give you, basically how the Black African American Negro is just like a creature, an entity that they created legally. It's removed from the family of humans. So you don't want to be there. Okay. It's not who you truly are. In the 18th and 19th centuries, immigrants coming into the United States were often confused by the many languages that were spoken at the port of entry into this new land. Spanish, for example, used Negro to refer to a Black man and Negra to refer to a Black woman. Mulatto had many meanings. Among these were mule, mulatto, or a person of mixed ancestry, which usually denotes part Black or part white. Okay, and let's see. Indian children of high school age at a funeral of an Indian attended by a Black man used the words nigger, gigolo, and so forth. All right. To associate word usage with racism is quite proper, but is not always so. There's no inflexible relationship between a stereotype and a behavior. So, you know, we can't be sensitive about these words and terms and holding on to the terms black and all these things that have been forced upon us, especially when you actually look and you see how throughout history there's several cases where it shows you that these terms were used to completely decimate you, to remove you from any aboriginal connection, title to the land that you have, right? That's for the most part what it was about. And you know, to me that's slander. That's, you know, that's dangerous. You can't continue to hold on to these vestiges. And that's also why we're here, like why we advise everyone to go into the Moorish Science Temple and to learn about this, learn further about this, and to proclaim your nationality. Okay. You can't remain in this status. You can't remain there for several reasons. I think we did a good job explaining why and showing you how this is taking place with a scholar, you know, who's the preeminent expert on Native American ancestry, Native American heritage and history. And he lets you know without just coming out and saying it, he lets you know in so many words, okay, that he even said the people who were full-blooded Indians will be being classified as Negroes. Okay, he says that. He lets you know that. He said it in a bunch of words, and then he just came out and said that also. Okay, and I mean this is documented. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no argument. No one can argue against that. And it's just plain as day. So once again, go to the website, moorsinamerica.com for more information. The link is in the description on the YouTube video. You have to share this. You have to get the word out. That's it. You have to get the word out. And also that video I was talking about earlier, there's an article on the moorsinamerica.com site. Montauk Indians declared too black to be native in court. You could just go, you could watch that, read that, share it. But also the video on YouTube, From Indian to Black, Black or Civiliter Mortus. Okay. Also, it's on Facebook, on the Moors in America page on Facebook. The first thing on there. You need to share that, tag everyone in it. Make that go viral, and on YouTube too. Okay. Y'all, everybody go like it and share it. It's real information. And this is helping to change the way that we view ourselves. And it's just really important that this word gets out so that people can expand their consciousness. And it's time. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end it for the day. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for liking and sharing the video, and also going the extra mile and also going on Facebook and doing the same with this video and tagging everybody you know in it, because it's time to get this information out there and go viral. But also on Facebook, tag everyone you know in it. All right. That's the only thing I'm asking for y'all, is to go on there and tag people and share it, get it out there. Okay. Because you know this information needs to get known. And if you haven't seen that From Indian to Black video yet about the Montauks and what happened to them, you need to check it out. All right. And on that note, I'm out. Peace.